Chris Bowen, welcome to the program. Let's start on this. There's been a lot of debate about easing restrictions. Victoria's actually been the most cautious of the states. Do you think, though, there is now a need to reassess the three-stage reopening plan?
Well, David, I think what this does is reinforce what we've been saying, that there's a long way to go yet, that we're not through this. We've provided bipartisan support to premiers of all parties who've taken a cautious approach because that's the right thing to do. We have been aware for a long time that a second wave is a distinct possibility if we are not very cautious. I've been disappointed to see political attacks on premiers who are following the health advice, whether it's Anastasia Palaszczuk or Dan Andrews, who's been attacked for being too cautious by the Victorian Liberal Party, which strikes me as a particularly low rent and immature operation, when Dan has been providing the leadership necessary and taken the cautious approach, and I think he's been right to do so. We have a long way to go yet. Until this virus is defeated everywhere, it's not defeated anywhere. We've got to remember, 6 months ago, one person in the world had this virus, and since then it has wreaked havoc across the planet. And until we have this under control completely, it is not under control at all. So hence, we all want to see the economy opened up. We all want to see borders open. We all want to see it be back to normal. But it would be irresponsible to do it too quickly. I think Dan Andrews has shown real leadership, as have the other premiers, in taking a cautious approach. I'm not going to single out any particular political party here. Okay. All the premiers have shown leadership and a cautious approach, and they are to be congratulated for it.
Let's turn to branch stacking. Can you explain why Adam Somyurek was booted out of the Labor Party?
Well, the first and most important thing, David, is that what we saw here was wrong and unacceptable. It was not the Labor Party at its best. The industrial scale branch stacking, the vendettas, the attacks, that's not the Labor Party at its best. Far from it, the opposite. And the people who have the right to be most angry about this are the Labor Party, the true believers, the good people who turn up week after week with no personal agenda or ambition. And the people who rely on us to form governments and who know that Australia is better off with Labor governments. The true believers are the ones who have the right to be most angry.
Why specifically was Adam Somyurek booted out of the Labor Party?
Well, I think that was all pretty self-evident on
Can you explain it to me?
60 Minutes.
What was the reason?
Well, I think it was all pretty self-evident. Anybody who saw that show could see the branch stacking, the personal agendas, the vendettas.
So was
Anthony
it the branch
Albanese
stacking?
and Dan Andrews. Well, if I could just make,
Okay.
David, you asked me a question. If you could let me answer the question, Anthony Albanese and Dan Andrews have shown great leadership in responding very strongly. I mean, I heard the discussion before. The argument was about whether they've done too much. Well, I'll take that discussion. I mean, I prefer the discussion about whether the leaders have acted too much rather than not enough.
Okay, but my question...
Sorry, the medal of leadership is forged in the difficult times. The medal of leadership, David, is forged in the difficult times.
Okay.
And that's what Anthony Albanese and Dan Andrews have both done.
The reason for expulsion, though, was that the branch stacking?
Well, I think you could say all of the above. I mean, there was industrial scale branch stacking, there was personal vendettas, there was clearly inappropriate attacks on colleagues. It was all there for all to see.
Okay,
I mean,
attacks on colleagues and nasty language and stuff is not
argue.
unique to Adam Somyurek. I'm just trying to be clear about...
Well, quite right, and not unique to the Australian Labor Party either. But when you take it all,
the reason for the expulsion,
whole,
sorry, the reason for the expulsion was the scale of the branch stacking. Is that right?
Well, I think you could see an industrial scale operation in place, and clearly it was an attempt to subvert the proper processes of the Labor Party and was unacceptable.
So is a smaller amount of branch stacking okay?
Well, no branch stacking is acceptable. Now, of course, there'll always be matters of scale, but no branch stacking is acceptable, and all allegations should be taken seriously.
So that brings us to New South Wales. A New South Wales state frontbencher stood down from the front bench on Friday. 7 other members were suspended after allegations of branch stacking. Should anyone involved there be expelled from the party?
Well, David, let's have a look at that. As I said, all allegations of branch stacking should be properly examined, and this one has been. There was an anonymous dossier prepared about a few branches, quite small branches, but a few branches. Bob Namber instigated a full inquiry, which has now been reported and made public. It's made a series of recommendations which have either been implemented or are being implemented. Julia Finn has stood aside to enable the relevant tribunal to consider her future, her role. Look, as I said, every piece of branch stacking should be taken seriously, every allegation should be taken seriously, but in New South Wales, bulk memberships are Bulk membership renewals are not allowed. We have a tripwire so that only a small number of members can be admitted to a branch at every meeting.
But still these problems persist.
Every new member is reported to the Administrative Committee.
This internal inquiry did find fake documents, impropriety and so on. Again, it comes down to whether some level of this behaviour is okay or whether there is a zero tolerance approach. Should those involved in branch stacking...
There's a zero tolerance approach, David.
So should someone involved in this be expelled?
There's a zero tolerance approach, but well, there's a process to go through. This has been referred to the relevant tribunals of the party, and that's an independent process. They are independent people. I must say, David, I've always found Julia Finn a very strong local member, fully engaged with her community, a good person in politics for the right reasons. But there are issues to be worked through. These matters should be referred to the tribunal. Julia Finn has done the right thing by standing aside to allow that to occur.
OK, but to be fair, I'm not defending Adam Somyurek here, but it doesn't sound like he was given the chance to go through that process to defend his position at all. It seems it was a very quick morning after out you go, but with the New South Wales example, it's something different.
Well, I think there's a difference between an expose with things caught on film and an anonymous dossier.
Isn't that the very point here, that because it was caught on camera, there's a different reaction?
Well, you act according to the evidence before you. The National Executive, in my view, did the right thing with the evidence before it, and Bob Namber and the New South Wales Labor Party have had the right approach with the evidence before them in this case. And look, there's allegations from time to time in all political parties. Malcolm Turnbull boasts of the biggest branch stacking operation in Australian history. He ended up as Prime Minister. All political parties go through this from time to time. It's how you deal with it, though.
All right. Well, as a Western Sydney MP, can you say that there is no branch stacking in Western Sydney branches of the Labor Party?
I find the branches in the Labor Party to be good branches operating well and in the way they should. That's my observation.
But do they branch
through
stack?
Western Sydney and everywhere else I go.
The question was whether there's branch
members
stacking.
Engaged. Well, I've seen no evidence of it, David. No, but where you have this one
apart from this
allegation made
inquiry,
and that's being fully investigated.
Well, given there at least is the inquiry finding of branch stacking in New South Wales, given we also know about the Aldi bag of cash, $100,000 from a Chinese billionaire going to the State Secretary, why isn't the National Executive intervening in the New South Wales branch in this way?
Well, there have been big changes in New South Wales. There have been wholesale changes, both changes to personnel and to approach, and that was appropriate. It was handled appropriately for the circumstances. As I said, political parties will go through this. I mean, the Victorian Liberal Party's got a former state director in prison. Malcolm Turnbull ran a massive stacking operation to get into Parliament. I mean, what matters is how you respond, and Anthony Albanese and Daniel Andrews have responded very strongly to this, and Bob Namber in New South Wales has responded very well to the quite different set of circumstances. I understand the connection you're making, but a very different set of circumstances.
Okay. Well,
but a different,
I'm just trying to determine
response.
whether there's a certain amount that's okay or whether it is zero tolerance.
I think I dealt with that by saying, of course, no branch stacking is okay, but you deal with the evidence you have before you.
Okay. In Victoria, is it your understanding that rank and file members for the next 3 years will not get a vote on any pre-selection?
Well, I understand that's the nature of the intervention. Now, of course, the criticism that you and your colleagues were making was that maybe that's too long and too much. But again, I would take that criticism rather than people saying that the National Executive hadn't done enough. Obviously, people will be working to restore the Victorian branch to its normal operations as quickly as possible. Okay. But as I said before, I think the branch members of Victoria are the ones who have the right to be angriest because they are the ones let down by an attempt to subvert the processes where they, as good men and women of the Labor Party, have a say in the personnel and policy decisions facing the party.
Let me ask you about the beneficiaries of the alleged industrial-scale branch stacking in Victoria that we've been talking about there. Adam Somyurek did say in this 60-minute story that people like Josh Burns and Tim Watts are only there because of what he's done. He said, quote, "Tim Watts is like bowing to me." Are you confident these colleagues of yours were legitimately pre-selected?
Absolutely, and my understanding is that Tim Watts barely knows Adam Somyurek, for example. I mean, let's have a proper evidentiary approach to this. The members of the Labor Party in the federal parliament are good quality individuals, and let me say this, David, I would take our team over the other team any day of the week. We bat deep in terms of talent. There are backbenchers who could walk into a cabinet meeting tomorrow and hold their own, as opposed to the government, which struggles to form a cabinet with the talent they have. So the Labor caucus is as good a quality as it's ever been,
right,
with a wide array of experiences and professions and talent expressed in the caucus. I'm very proud of my caucus colleagues, all of them, regardless of what state they come from, including the Victorians.
Just stepping back, taking a picture look at this problem that, as you rightly point out, isn't just confined to the Labor Party. Years ago, you wrote a book, Hearts and Minds, in which you supported the idea of at least trialling community pre-selections, taking that power of deciding who candidates are out of people who are signed up to the political party. Why is that? Is that still a good idea, do you think?
I think it can be an appropriate option in some circumstances, yes. It has been done a little bit in New South Wales, moving to more the primary system, as you say, community primaries, community pre-selections. I think there are circumstances where it can add value, where it can be the right approach. I wouldn't say it's the right approach for absolutely every seat and absolutely every cycle. But I do think parties, the Labor Party, it is good to have that option. It has happened a bit in New South Wales, and I think it's been a good reform and one which may play a role going forward for the Labor Party, and if other parties choose to take it up as well.
So should this current crisis in Victoria perhaps be a catalyst to return to that idea?
I think we should always be looking at fresh and innovative ideas to ensure that our candidate selection process is robust, putting up the best people, that our party is reforming. I mean, reform is a never receding finishing line, David. You can't just say, tick, we've done that. You should always be thinking about new ideas.
All right, final one. I want to turn to the cyber attacks the Prime Minister was talking about on Friday. Well, a lot of people are working from home at the moment. A lot of businesses have their staff working from home. Are you worried that increases the risk of cyber attack at the moment?
Well, what I'm worried about, David, is that the Prime Minister held a press conference, fair enough, but the government has been completely asleep at the wheel when it comes to cybersecurity. I mean, Tim Watts, our cybersecurity spokesperson, has pointed out that 40% of government agencies don't do the basic work necessary. We don't have a cybersecurity strategy in place. The 2016 one has run out, and Scott Morrison hasn't renewed it, and there is no minister with dedicated responsibility to cybersecurity. So holding a press conference and lecturing businesses that they need to do better and warning Australians is, OK, fine, get your own house in order. I'm worried about the government's level of exposure. The government has not taken this seriously. We've provided constructive support to any sensible measures to enhance cybersecurity, but only the government of the day has the levers available to it to ensure that every day government data is being protected. And under this government, under Scott Morrison, there's been more marketing than substance when it comes to ensuring Australia is safe against cybersecurity attacks from wherever they may come.
When you say the government's not taking this seriously, though, what's the evidence of that? I take your point about the strategy needs updating, and I think the PM said that it will be within the coming months. But it doesn't sound from what I'm told that there has been a successful breach of government or business databases here.
Well, the evidence is the Australian National Audit Office reports, which show that 40% of government agencies aren't doing the basic work, that 29% of government Commonwealth entities aren't doing the work necessary. The fact we don't have a strategy in place as we speak. I mean, David, if I said to you, do you think Australia should have a cybersecurity strategy? I think you and most thinking reasonable Australians would say, yeah, that sounds like a reasonable idea. We don't. It's expired. It's gone. It's finished. It hasn't been renewed. The government hasn't got around to renewing it. They've been too busy holding press conferences and more engaged in the marketing of cybersecurity measures than the substance of ensuring that Australians' data is safe.
Chris Bowen, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, David.